are having, what are those demands or needs which we can meet if we were talking to each other between the businesses. So that's when we decided that there is a need for a major transformational activity in our business, and of retail, be it of aviation, and at the same time we get a single visibility of the customer. Now visibility is one part, but it had to be on a bedrock of trust, convenience and personalization. So how do you instill trust, how do you bring about convenience, and how do you get into personalization was when technology adoption and use of AI was taken up in various projects of ours. We created one unified application on a common platform, which is our 𝗩𝗹𝗶𝗰 app, where customer can not only book LPG, they can buy lubricants, they can get into identifying, locating our dealers, distributors. We could do B2B transactions on our application. Our loyalty operates through that application. Just to give you a magnitude of this application, on a daily basis there are almost 20 million customers who are coming to our fuel outlets. On an annual basis there are around 550 million LPG cylinders we deliver, which get which have a traceability available on our app, and the customer can know what his buying behavior is and when and how he can get a refill for his subsequent requirement. We have more than 25,000 lorries, tankers running across the country ferrying our products. We have more than 120 locations which are operating to meet the fueling needs of our LPG and retail customers. To bring all of them on a common platform, only with an objective to instill trust in the minds of customer, we have automated all of them and brought them on a platform which is called 𝗖𝗍𝗲, where we have complete visibility of every transaction which is happening at our retail outlet or at our distributorships. At our locations, we have used advanced analytics and AI to attain operational excellence and bringing safety to next level, where we are able to detect any deviation from SOPs and warn our locations that there is a practice which is beyond the established guidelines. In terms of customer, we have deployed AI on our conversational chatbot, which speaks in 13 different languages, and it is offering solutions to every nook and corner in the country for our LPG customers. So the objective of bringing technology and using AI is only to make it more convenient for the customer to do business with us and believe that 𝗣𝗶𝗃𝗃 is a trusted partner.
Thank you for capturing this full journey. Keen to understand a quick response. Did it also lead to change of the internal organization, separate departments pursuing that customer? Did it realign the internal processes also?
Yeah, exactly. More than 3,200 business processes were redefined. Earlier, each and every department used to have their own digital teams. Now we have centralized digital marketing, or you can say the digital transformation under one project, Project 𝗍𝗹𝗶𝗰𝗁, which takes care of the entire marketing transformation for all the businesses.
Right.
And that's how the organizational restructuring also has been done.
Right, thanks. So Mani, coming to you now, when we talk about customer experience, we often missed segment is the grassroots level, which includes rural domestic, urban domestic, as well as agriculture consumers. And the solar rooftop solutions, especially blended with storage, means real economic empowerment for this segment. You have lived this journey of solar rooftop now. It's still catching up, but you've seen many years working with various stakeholders. If you can just paint that journey, what were the learnings, what has been successes, and what way forward holds? Mani.
Thank you. And thank you, KPMG team, for having me here. It's indeed a pleasure. Let me start with yet another story. After we heard such a lovely story, now I'm taking you back to 2016, 2017, when solar rooftop was just, was a nascent technology per se. And at that point of time, the solar prices hadn't really fallen the way they've fallen now. So at that time, it only made commercial sense for CNI consumers to put solar rooftop. Having said that, still that time also CNI was not really taking on solar rooftop. Basically, there was one completely new technology. Everyone was, everyone wanted to know how it will play out. What are the risks involved? There's a technology risk involved. And secondly, the financing was high because of a new technology. At that point of time, World Bank actually gave a line of credit to bring down the cost of financing for solar rooftop. But the main thing was, if you have to take care of the technology risk from the customer's point of view, how do you do that? And I think at that time, the RESCOs played a huge part. So if you see the loan, which is now closed, it was 80% of that actually went to RESCOs. A lot of RESCOs entered the market. As the RESCOs entered the market, they took on the technological risk, making the customer comfortable with the technology. And that is what actually led to the escalation of solar rooftop in the CNI market. As we all know, the solar rooftop prices fell. And we also tried to see if we can push solar rooftop in the MSME sector. Now, MSME is a completely different ballgame from these big corporates. CNI took on the challenge, RESCO players came in to do it. But for MSME, when their cash flow is such a problem, for them to make a huge capex investment, or if the RESCO players have to enter that market, for them to see the credibility of that MSME, right? So that question became a big question. And to resolve that, we tried to put a risk sharing facility in place. It was more like a first loss. And we also in talks with CGTMSE to put a risk sharing facility now to actually push it in the MSME sector. We did a lot of stakeholder consultations for the MSME sector by going to, because, basically wherever the hubs are and figuring it out. And what we realized what commercial sense was there. So from the customer point of view, it makes sense, but it wasn't easy for them to put a solar rooftop because of the financial part and the credibility issues. Having said that, now we are all focusing on residential. We all know about the PM scheme. And that again is coming with a new set of challenges. What I understand, and we were trying to understand from the market, why, what are the problems which are being faced? I think one of the key problems which is coming up from the customer point of view is, if there's huge subsidy out here. So anyone who wants to put a solar rooftop on the residences, everyone knows there's a huge subsidy here. But I think the banks can only lend to people who actually have the house on their name. And normally the person who is working in the house is not in his name, it's normally in his father's or the mother's name. So that's another problem that we are facing, and we are trying to resolve that. And now coming to the last segment that you refer to, the agriculture, the sector, which the consumers are completely different. For them, we have, it's not solar rooftop per se, but it's basically giving them irrigation pumps which can ply from solar. Now, that's the KUSUM scheme that the government has taken out. So we worked a lot in that scheme, and that scheme is taking up. But what World Bank actually feels is where we can really make that difference to the farmers as a consumer is if we can actually push for 𝗲𝗍𝗶𝗃, which is where the solar rooftop is actually with the farmer. We've done a study where we have seen that why it's not doing that well right now is because it needs a lot of time and it needs a mindset change. There's an inherent trust deficit when it comes between the farmer and the distribution company, which needs to be taken care of. Because farmers don't have meters, very few states actually charge them enough. So if you really look at the 𝗲𝗍𝗶𝗃 and you actually implement it, it would raise the farmer's income for sure. The government doesn't have to give subsidy anymore, which they're supposed to pay. There's a huge other thing when is the subsidy paid. And the third, the distribution companies don't have to deal with the loss-making consumers. So we did this study where we found out that's the win-win for everyone. It will take a lot of time to implement and it requires a mindset change. But if you want something which is completely focused on farmers, I think we can really double the income if we can implement that.
I think the mindset change you mentioned is important. It links to a lot of awareness that needs to happen. And 𝗲𝗍𝗶𝗃 is the off-grid one, which is fully available with the farmer. And on MSME also, I remember there was sizing.
It's grid connected.
Grid connected.
Grid connected, but the farmer has the
ownership.
Yeah.
Okay. And MSME also, there were sizing issues also. A bigger installation catering to multiple MSMEs in that cluster and so on, which thank you for painting that picture. Com, coming to you, you have heard the Indian side, you have been here for multiple panels, and yesterday also you heard about few things. So how prevalent, what kind of customer reforms you've worked with US, UK, also seen telecom sector very closely. So some examples, your reactions on what everyone has said, some experiences from other parts of the world. Com.
Thanks, Vikas, and great to be on this panel. It's great that virtually everything has been said at this point, Vikas, so all that's left for me to do is to predict the future. To predict the future, maybe take a step back into the past. On the 9th of December 1968, there was a demonstration took place which was called at the time the mother of all demonstrations by Doug Engelbart when he demonstrated the first computer mouse at the Fall Joint Computer Conference. So that's a time when there were computer conferences. We think that's so quaint and so unusual now, which means that in the not too distant future that we would have a session that will be on AI and energy will seem quaint because AI will just become a tool that we use to better our lives and to improve our businesses. So what I wanted to maybe frame was just, first of all, 3 generic use cases as we see it for this sector and how AI can maybe help those. And then maybe 2 specific examples just to bring to life what people are doing today to make this happen. If I take the generic use cases, when you run a utility, whether it's an energy utility or a telecoms utility, you need to do 3 things for your customers. You need to make sure that the service works. You need to make sure that the bill is as low as possible. And on the hopefully rare occasions when they need to contact you, you need that experience to be a good experience because they rarely contact you and therefore that's often how they form their view of your brand. AI technologies, and Rahul has described so many of them already in your submission, you're already delivering these in India on the reliability of service, the work that goes on across the discoms and the grid in general to build in reliability and reduce the number of outages on the grid. In terms of the cost of energy, informed customers make better decisions in terms of particularly if you have time of day use tariffs that they might have, but also taking fraud and theft out of the network again directly goes to reducing prices for customers. And then you would have referred to chatbots. The interesting thing about chatbots is people don't like to wait to speak to a human, but typically they've really been irritated by traditional chatbots. what we're finding with clients now is when they implement new generative AI-enabled chatbots, that the generative AI chatbots are generating higher customer experience scores than human interactions, which is incredible, that the service is actually better than interacting with a human. And there's one particular client who would claim that they have a chatbot that is doing the work of over 100 people. Now, I don't believe that, but that is being put out there as a statistic. So that's maybe some of the generic ones, Vikas. In terms of two specific ones that when you asked for examples from around the world, I was particularly interested in these two. One of them is a very industrial application in the agriculture space and using solar rooftop. In Australia, there's quite extensive work being done on automated milking machines for dairy farmers who are off the grid, so they're not able to connect to the grid. They've built these automated milking machines where they entice the cows into the stall through brushes. So they like to brush up against their sides, and they walk through these, and they find themselves in the actual stall. They're fed in the stall. The udders are cleaned and inspected by a camera to make sure that there's no sign of disease. The cow is then milked and then released back out in. And the cows can regulate themselves when they go through it. And one of the interesting developments they needed to make with this was the cows enjoyed it so much that they were visiting the milking machine more regularly than was good for them to visit the milking machine. So they had to use the cow's tag to make sure they didn't go any more than 3 times a day. Yields were improved, insight was improved, and transformation for a farmer, as I'm sure you can imagine. The second example I would have is a company that 𝗖𝗍𝗃, I know, is familiar with, and I think is one of the most innovative retail energy companies in the world, Octopus Energy. They started out as a retail energy company working in the UK. They've developed themselves into a multi-billion dollar software company. So they took the software platform that they developed and made that a specific opportunity for themselves. But they are working on an initiative at the moment where they've run a pilot, they've presented back on the findings from that pilot, so there's substantial information behind this, and they are now targeting 100,000 customers with 0 energy bills. And they're achieving this through installing a range of technology in the home, both energy technology, as in solar panels and batteries and so on, but also in-home insights. And to the point you were making earlier, Vikas, these are customers that are prepared to cede some control to their energy provider as to when they get the use of their energy. And the energy provider then uses automation and AI techniques to balance when they use different parts of the energy system that sits within their home. And they are confident that by 2030, they will have 100,000 homes paying 0 energy on their plans, paying £0 for energy on their plans. Now, I appreciate in India, 100,000 is not an awful lot. But in the UK market, for an operator like Octopus, that is a very significant number. So I'll maybe pass it back to you, Vikas, on that.
Thanks, Gom. Some really interesting use cases. So now a quick round again, and then we'll open it up to audience. And I'm going to deep dive into the use of AI for different solutions, whether it is advancement, skills, tariff, security, transparency, and governance around data, and so on. So 𝗖𝗍𝗃, coming to you, what do you see as future advancements of AI? Do you anticipate how it will continue to transform the next wave of use cases? How do you see those evolving?
I'll start with what I think is one of the biggest unresolved problems. We talked about rooftop solar. Mani talked about rooftop solar for CNI. Today's tariffs don't accommodate for the kind of rooftop solar that is going to go in. Okay? And I think if we use conventional methodologies for tariff setting, they're not going to work in the future world. Transmission user system charges, distribution user system charges, retail tariffs, and where they're regulated, it's not going to be fitting for that, because what was a few standard profiles a residential profile or a business profile is not going to be the case anymore. If Octopus is looking at 100,000 customers with zero energy bill, but they're still going to be connected to the grid. And I think this is a problem which needs a lot of collaboration, it needs a lot of thinking. And I think this is also where one of India's biggest opportunities lies. We can actually do a lot of work on this and take it to the world as to how do you use an AI tool chain, how do you use machine learning in order to set the tariffs and the rules for the future. And I think in particular in terms of the sort of what's happening on technology, yeah, we get all the chat GPTs and the perplexities and the large language models. Actually what has happened as a consequence of that are small language models and tiny language models. And I think when we look at subsystems, my home, my business, a large business, it's the tiny language models that are going to be really, really important to understand how do you create some specific signatures and how do you really work on a instrument or a unit process to figure out what is happening. And then couple that with pretty reasonably priced chips now with neural networks sitting on them. It's really going to create a very transformative set of equipment and components which when talk to each other can be almost self-control as long as you give them some parameters. And that's really where we need to go. Because like I said before, most people in our homes, we don't care about demand-side response. But at the same time, if you give us something which we fit and forget, and we say this is going to save you 10% on energy, or it's going to get you a £0 energy bill, we're more than happy to deal with that. But you need these components of tiny language models, you need neural networks on chips in order to be able to make those decisions and maximize the economic value. And also then feed that data in to what should be the tariffs and rules going forward.
Sure. I think one additional point I want you to cover is that employees of the organizations are essentially first customers. And when you go to, when they meet different service providers across the globe, how is the internal organization gearing up?
Yeah, I mean, it's a very interesting question because it's much easier to, I think, sell technology to customers than it is to your own colleagues. I start with a simple process. I say, guys, let's first look at our data. We capture hundreds of data points for every product that we make on our lines. But we've been using conventional data engineering methods. So when it actually comes to understanding variability, when it actually comes to trying to solve problems which have happened as they've leaked through, it actually needs a lot of post-processing of data. So we are taking that first step. We're saying, let's use the tools that are available today to create better data engineering systems. And then how do you use them to control our service processes? How do you use them to control and drive consistency in our manufacturing processes? So it's a bit of a stair-step approach. I think trying to jump the chasm, very often you fall through into the gap. But we're taking those sort of mini steps, and then we'll come to the point where we can get our production engineers and service engineers to move to higher value work and get computers to draw out exceptions which we need to deal with.
Right. So, Rahul, I'm now going to jump to the issue of trust. You mentioned about range of options and a common app now. I'm sure building trust, confidence on data would have taken a lot of awareness with the customers, engaging with them. How that data governance model or that piece was solved when you offered and moved to that unified app that you alluded to?
Yeah, so, building trust in this age of AI and data analytics, it's a very delicate balance between innovation and responsibility. And, you cannot deliver trust unless you are able to demonstrate transparency. And transparency comes from the point where you let the customer know what is the data point related to the customer or the behavior of interactions of the customer, what is the data point you are picking up, how are you using that data point, and how is it going to benefit the customer. If you are able to spell that out clearly to the customer, I think the trust automatically, it happens. And communication is a very, very important channel in this entire activity. So unless you are able to tell them that this data is going to be benefiting you in this particular manner, and how you have inbuilt consent protocols in your data collection system, all those will give him the confidence to take you as a trusted partner, and second, they will not be uncomfortable in sharing their piece of information. Now, to give you some examples, when we get the new age vehicles, they come with the in-board diagnostics. Now, if we are getting a consent from the customer, we are able to build in those kind of protocols wherein we are able to tell the customer that he is in a range where he needs to refuel, which are the fueling options available with him in the next few kilometers, and how many times has he fueled at that particular retail outlet. So that gives him the confidence that it's not an intrusion into his system, but it is something which is telling him that you've already had an interaction and you already fueled your car in this outlet, and you have a choice to make right now. You can fuel it again. Same way in a B2B transaction, when you look at the trust comes from the fact how transparent are you in your pricing. So if you are able to give visibility on how you have arrived at a pricing, obviously there are certain trade practices. If you are able to give him that visibility and how over periods of time those trends have happened, I'm sure the customer takes you as a very serious player and comes back to you for his repeat purchases.
Right. So, transparency and regular communication around things they need around that data. So now jumping to the aspect of skilling, Mani, you mentioned about mindset change, awareness. So this is required at both sides. Once the user, the discoms that will first adopt that, and then on the customers. What do you think should be done around skilling, awareness? What all frameworks, how can an institution like yours help in that?
So when it comes to skilling, especially at the distribution company level, when we are talking about it, for the customer service, I'll go back to the 3 points which were mentioned. First thing important is a good service. Second is the lowest bill possible. And the third is if a customer has a problem, they can call up a number. Now, when I started working in this sector, we dealt with states which were struggling with all three. And we all know about how huge the AT&C losses were. They've gone down now, comparatively. But these are the things that the distribution companies struggle with every day. And I agree, one size cannot fit all. So all are not in the same position. But you have a number of distribution companies which are still struggling with all these three. To give an example, we actually worked with one state where we helped them set up a customer center because the concept was alien, right? So it's a curve. Now what I feel, frankly, for the distribution companies, the curve is very steep, especially the state-owned distribution companies, because first, they have to do these three, and now the way technological advancements are happening, their skilling becomes even more important. They are still struggling with, the billing systems which were put in place to completely institutionalize them. And suddenly you're telling them to take care of the load which is going to come from solar rooftop. They have to be cognizant how to integrate that in their system. Then EVs. Now when EV is coming, the charging stations are coming, which is another load that they will have to take care of. So therefore, skilling becomes of paramount importance, and I cannot emphasize this enough. when we talk about transition, we talk about moving towards net zero, we talk about all the technological advancements, it all boils down at the end at the distribution sector. And to your question about what World Bank is doing, so any loan that World Bank gives to any state, it does not go without that addressing this critical need of the state, whether whatever they need at that point of time, whether it's skilling for new technologies, is skilling for the things that they're doing right now, doing it better, international transfer of knowledge, domestically transfer of knowledge from one state to another. So we capture all of that. But I think without that, this is a missing piece of a puzzle that we all need to look at.
Thank you. I think getting back to basics and the provision of that basic is something that everyone has said. And in a recent discussion where some DISCOM heads were talking about success stories, I think 2-3 things that came out. One, know your customers, know your assets, know your network, and know your people. DISCOMs or any service provider who has spent time on these, put in systems in place that are used and updated regularly, are doing well on customer front and updated. So are doing well on the customer front. So Com, last on you, and then we'll maybe see if we have time for audience. The ethical implementation of all of this comes, and our CEO survey, I'm not quoting figures, you know that, so has also pointed out this. And also the role of humans, Anish mentioned in his PPT, will remain central to all of this and making it happen. What should be that approach? What are the guardrails we need to look at? Com.
So I think the report you're referring to is a recent report we've done on from CEOs' views, and it's a really interesting finding, because on one side we had over 3/4 of CEOs saying that they were excited about and planning to invest in AI tools in their business, and on the other side an almost identical but slightly larger number of them were saying that they were terrified of AI tools in their business. So there's an overlap there of people who are equally excited and terrified by the consequences or the potential of AI in their business. So they are literally driving their business with one foot flat on the accelerator and the other foot flat on the brake. And so the net effect of that is the engine in the middle gets burnt out because they're not moving forward. And really, I think this, you can imagine this is difficult for CEOs, because there are different philosophies in different parts of the world on how to regulate AI. We have lots of different approaches in different parts of the world, but basically falling into two main categories. One are the people who are saying, let's just go with AI, give some guidelines, and we'll regulate the problems. And then another cohort, which is largely the European cohort, who are saying we need to regulate this thing before it gets out and gets beyond our control. Now, who knows who is going to be right in the long run, but businesses, and particularly global businesses, are trying to deal in that environment, which is very confusing and very difficult. In terms of the solution, from my perspective, because this is the #1 thing that CEOs would talk to us about, we would say there are guardrails that you can put in place that will give you the confidence that you have some degree of control over AI in your business. Put those guardrails in place and then take your foot off the brake and let the innovation happen. And we had one very interesting example with a CEO who was terrified of AI and was saying he was not going to move forward until he had confidence in the regulation of the space. And we said to him, are you sure there is not generative AI models operating in your business today? He said, absolutely certain. And we did some small piece of analysis, and he had 4 different generative AI models operating in small parts of his business, but he was absolutely blown away by the fact that that happened. So there are guardrails you can put in place that give you the confidence. I think the final piece, which Anish referred to over the last 2 days, which is there is the human element. As much as generative AI is a brilliant and magical technology, it is still a derivative technology. All it does is derive conclusions from information it already has. It does not have human creativity. It does not have the human mind and the ability of groups of people to come together and come up with amazing solutions. So we should proceed forward with confidence with AI tools, with the necessary guardrails in place, and have it unlock the next level of human creativity.
Thank you. So one foot on accelerator, one on brake. Anish would say that is how I drive. I don't agree, but on that note, I think Anish has already signaled when he walks in and sits in front means we are running out of time. So thank you to everyone for sharing the perspective and deep insights. Thank you very much. We'll bring this to close.
Vikas and your wonderful panel. Thank you so much. I caught only parts of it because being the master of ceremonies, you run around a little bit. But I caught some very interesting things. And as a good consultant, I always pick those things up and make sure that they have impact. So you're going to see this very quickly, very soon. Can we have the thing? I do the honors or somebody else does it? Okay. Okay, now we go into a session which is a keynote, and it's a very interesting keynote for the next 20-25 minutes. We are going to hear Dr. Rohini Srivathsa, CTO for Microsoft South Asia and India. And when I met with her, we started talking about AI, and then I realized that that's just a starting point. You now have a range of other technologies coming in which suddenly could append AI. And now we know what is happening in the world of AI. What is existing today is getting upended in the next 3 weeks. But then all of those genres can actually get upended or maybe combined with other things. And two things which we spoke about was quantum computing. And the second is the high performance computing. And when I started, like a good consultant, I started using it. She sent a nice email to say that this is what this does, this is what the other one does, and this is what the third one does. Don't mix your apples up. So rather than trying to do that anymore, I'm going to invite Rohini to come on the stage and address us.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Anish, Akhilesh, and others at KPMG for inviting me. I know you folks have been talking about AI for some time, and I have to say AI by itself is in early stages of its journey. But for the next 25 odd years, I'll speak a little bit about how the confluence of few technologies are changing the way in which science is done. So hopefully this becomes a little interesting detour from just talking about AI. So let's go a little bit into it. One, of course, I mean, the topic of this conference included is that there is just an urgent need for scientific discovery, whether you look at energy, whether you look at renewable energy, food security, drug discovery. There's just tremendous need for addressing really difficult problems that the world is facing. And yet, when you think about the scientific world, and I want to put this context for you so that it gives you a sense for what is the problem I'm speaking about. When you think about the scientific world, right, it deals with things all the way from particle physics to molecules to fluid dynamics, and the scales are from, picometers to nanometers, microns, and of course, light years. The specific part I will speak about is in the world of molecules. And it turns out that 90+% of the world's challenges have something to do with chemistry. That's quite interesting. Chemistry forms, material sciences, chemistry are actually the heart of a lot of challenges, whether it's fertilizers, material sciences, fuel cells. There's a lot of chemistry going on. Kind of also, is something that we don't normally think about, but it's an interesting space to occupy. Do you mind moving, excuse me? Can you move away from, yeah, thank you. So what happens at this scale is that when you're thinking about molecules, and if I go back to my own grad school work, I don't do scientific research now, but my grad school early work was in semiconductors, and a lot of my work was looking at deep submicron physics of semiconductor devices and thinking about Maxwell's equations and things like that. But if you kind of look at scientific discovery, there are a few challenges, and we talked about AI, but I'll bring it all together. One has to look at numerical calculations at extremely precise and challenging manners, and I'll bring that alive a little bit. People, if you're looking at drug discovery or fuel cells or any other biology or chemistry, one is looking at experiments. So there's a iterative process required with experiments. As unlike large language models, where the whole internet is the data, training data is actually quite scarce, and it's valuable. But that's a challenge and an opportunity. And the last one is that if you say, okay, you know what, you've got this molecule and you're going to simulate it, you actually are dealing with a very significant problem. And the problem is that reality at the quantum level is defined by an equation like this. Okay? And if you want to solve this equation, which is the famous Schrodinger's equation, if you want to solve this equation for even a few molecules, it's actually a problem that scales with the number of atoms in the molecule, and it's an exponential problem, truly astronomical. Very, very quickly, it becomes larger than the number of atoms in the universe. So you cannot do this just by throwing more data, more compute at it. That is not the nature of the problem, right? But turns out that in the world of science, if this clicker would work, something has happened to this. It was working just fine. Yeah. So anyway, I think what you're seeing is a beautiful scene of the Milky Way, which most of us don't get to see unless you are in a completely, like I saw it in Africa, it was just absolutely mind-boggling. But while they bring it up, what's happening is that there is some interesting things happening in the world of technology, and that is what is the nature of the conversation I want to have today. And it brings the mixture of high-performance computing, artificial intelligence, and quantum. And that is today bringing about what you may call the fifth paradigm of scientific discovery. Now, you may ask, what were the last four paradigms? The first one was when Newton saw the apple fall and it was empirical. You saw something and you said, this is science, right? The second one was when mathematics was created and you defined the world in Maxwell's equations. It was mathematics and conceptual thinking. The third, which is where I think a lot of my early research work went, is in simulations. You did a lot of simulations, and then fourth one, of course, data, and now we are in the world of AI. And hopefully we will get the deck to work. Sorry? Solar storm. Okay. Shall I come there?
No, they are fixing it, but they say it should take minutes.
Oh.
I don't know what exactly is it your computer or?
No, no, I just gave them a pen drive. Yeah, should not have. Don't go there. That computer, what OS it has, I don't know. I do have a file in there. Yeah. Yeah. No, no, no worries. Some of these things happen. You like my, yeah, that Milky Way picture is so lovely, isn't it? Yeah. But sometimes, you know, and we will get into that a little bit. I mean, when I see some of this, the way in which R&D is moving, I feel very jealous because it reminds me of my own early days in R&D, and I feel like, oh wow, if some of these tools were there at that time, so much can be done. So I feel very excited about this space as to what's possible today. And I think it becomes that combination of sort of human ingenuity and what computers can do. That is the crux of it. So we are, okay, we are here. Shall I get going 1 second? Okay, good. Okay, I'm going to pass all of this. Okay. Yeah, so let me not do this. Okay, all right. So like I was mentioning to you, while the problem of solving these Schrodinger's equation, and just as an example, right, and the reason I said that is because a lot of problems really have their roots at molecules level. And I'm fixing on that because, you know, it's useful to hear of one particular area and then think about how technologies are changing it. So technologies are changing that. Sir, can you just move a little this side? Yeah, thank you. So there are three kinds of things happening. One is, of course, generative AI, that is changing the way in which one even engages with data. Then I will speak about this as to how there are actually new kinds of AI models are getting created, and finally quantum. So let's look at this a little bit. And I spoke about this, so I will not go into it. This combination of high-performance computing, AI, and quantum is what is creating this fifth paradigm, if you will, of scientific discovery. So let's jump into each one of them. And by the way, this is happening across sectors. And of course, all of you folks are coming from the energy sector broadly. But again, if you look at the problem of thinking of materials and chemistry, that is very general. It is across material sciences, chemicals, pharma, fertilizers, agriculture, you name it. And there are companies which are looking at this new paradigm of scientific discovery, and we are in the very, very early stages of it. This is really the very beginning, and it's cutting edge of how this whole area is shaping up. So first is, of course, high-performance computing. And I mean, the likes of Microsoft and the other hyperscalers are building this at absolute massive scale. The kind of investments going into building in the supercomputer for AI and for all the computing is just absolutely massive, which includes not just the compute power, but also the networking. By the way, the kind of networking between the different components of a computer that was in the data center to train ChatGPT would have gone around the planet multiple times over. That's how much networking plays a role. Then, of course, high-performance storage and the fact that all of this is orchestrated. So there's a huge investment happening in just high-performance computing. And Azure has 65 regions, data centers, you know, miles and miles of fiber and network. So this is this sort of platform, this horsepower of compute is sort of the table stakes, and you have to work with that and leverage it to the maximum. Then comes AI. So there's three aspects of this. There's a scale, there's a speed, and accuracy. These three together play a role. And the three work, the scale comes from high-performance computing, speed comes from AI, and accuracy comes from quantum. That's the way one has to think about this. And of course, it's an evolving story. So how is AI helping in this space? There are at least 4 ways, but there are many more ways. One, of course, very, very importantly is that, see, when you start on a new area of research, and those of you who are in the field of R&D, the first thing you start is to figure out what else is out there. Right? There's a lot of literature survey. When you get papers, you are trying to study, and what else is out there. Today, that is possible with generative AI in a way that was not possible before. And your ability to not just search, but actually reason. So you can give a paper to AI, and you can reason with that paper, and actually have a question and answer, conversation with that paper, quite literally. So that knowledge. Then, of course, there are, the scientific method has hypothesis, has experimentation, analysis that you need to do. And that's where the AI starts to play a very, very interesting role. So let me just dive a little bit. So we are thinking of this space as really becoming a co-pilot for science. And this is very, very early years. Let me give you an example of what this is happening. So the point I talked about, that as soon as you start to look at molecular simulations and you want to go beyond a few atoms, you are looking at exponential expenses, right? What people are doing is that, can you now simulate a molecule using first principle simulator, but then use that data as synthetic data to train an AI model? That AI model then becomes an emulator. So when you are doing different positions, different configurations, you then use the emulator to do simulation, which is many, many times faster. So that, and then when you emulate it, and wherever the emulation is not as good, you go back to the first principle simulator. This sort of tandem behavior of how first principle simulator and an emulator works is one key way in which AI is helping. The other part of it is, so this one, if I say, let's say you have a material candidate, a molecule, and you want to be able to simulate it using the emulator, just what I just showed you, you get 10 to the power, multiple times acceleration to be able to get the material properties. That is the one side, which is in which you have solved the Schrödinger's equation. The other side of which is very, very interesting is that now using, just like you have image generators or your music generators, you can have an AI generator to create a molecule, to create what you need using synthesis. So that is AI generators. So you give a certain set of properties, and it's going to give you molecule candidates. That is what is also happening. So the example MatterGen, by the way, is a model. It's a generative AI model for material design. And it has been trained in such a way that given a certain set of material properties, you are able to get candidates of molecules with certain properties. That actually has a huge implication on when you're looking at a new molecule, and I'll give an example as to what it has meant for a particular battery cell invention of a particular material. So a company called Pacific Northwest, it has been able to create a completely new material for its lithium-ion batteries using this technique, where in the past, it could have looked at perhaps a few 100,000 or few thousand potential candidates. It was actually able to look at 32 million possible candidates. And using simulation, what I just talked about, it was able, the AI simulation I just talked about, the emulation I was able to talk about, it was able to bring it down to 500,000. That could then get simulated in using HPC at the molecular level using the high molecular dynamics simulators, and then finally have further simulations at different levels of accuracy to be able to create one molecule. That molecule, by the way, doesn't exist in the universe. So what you are seeing, and this entire thing was achieved in 9 months, which would have taken years, if not decades in the past. and may not even be possible. So what I'm showing you is the ability to bring together generative AI, AI simulation, high-performance computing in a very smart manner to completely change the trajectory of how you would do R&D. And R&D for all the different sectors I just spoke about. The last one I will speak about is quantum. Now, quantum technology is, of course, on its own journey. And India has, we have our own national quantum mission. I do engage with that quite a bit. But this is an evolving space, and people, of course, trying different approaches to creating qubits. And of course, there are issues in terms of noise, fidelity, what is the kind of superposition you can expect, et cetera. So the approach that in Microsoft we are taking is that you're going to look at this as your third pillar, along with HPC and AI, which is the scale and speed. You're going to look at this as the third pillar. And this quantum is going to be a pillar that adds to the simulation point I spoke about earlier. So if you had earlier a molecule that you would simulate using high-performance simulation for accuracy, and you create an AI emulator, what you will add to it is quantum for higher accuracy, and then again feed it back to the emulator to be able to give you the speed. So the three really work in tandem. Okay? The point is the quantum it's not a standalone. It is going to work in a system, and we have something called Azure Quantum Elements, which exactly brings these three together. And the idea is to be able to work off of each other and trade off between accuracy, speed, and scale. The approach that in this field of quantum, I don't know how many of you follow it, but for quantum to reach a space where it can be available for real-world applications, you need at least 50 plus logical qubits. Very often people talk about qubits. You have to make a differentiation between physical qubits and logical qubits. There is noise issues, there is fidelity and reliability issues. So you need to think about the 50 logical qubits is where you start to look at a quantum computer that is better than classical or what is called noisy intermediate scale quantum computers. At about 100 logical qubits, you start to get some really scientific advantage. And to solve real industrial scale problems, you need 1,000 logical qubits. So that's a journey that the industry is on. Microsoft has taken a stack view as a platform company. We've taken a stack view in that from a platform perspective, we have hardware from a whole range of qubit providers who are providing either superconductor-based qubit or neutral atom-based or ion trap-based qubits. And we are working with each one of them to ensure that as a developer, let's say as a solution developer, when you are looking at building a solution that brings this AI, HPC, and quantum that I've been talking about, you are able to work in a way that the hardware is virtualized. And the hardware is in a way that doesn't matter which hardware is inside. And so for that, you need to ensure that you're following a full stack approach and have the developer tools, toolkits, applications, orchestration, et cetera. What recently has happened in this space is some breakthroughs that if you just look it up, there are some breakthroughs that have happened in terms of qubit virtualization. That is changing the number of logical qubits that you can have vis-a-vis number of physical qubits and the trajectory that it was taking. How many logical qubits can you get from number of physical qubits? And I won't go into all of that, but the virtualization is a new technique that's coming. And the idea is that you want to be able to create a stack approach in a way that your applications where you orchestrate between high-performance computing, AI, and quantum is able to use quantum in a way that is platformized, virtualized, standardized, and there are standards. The last one is, of course, we have to have a co-pilot into everything. So we have a co-pilot Azure Quantum also. And you can go in and you don't have to be a code writer. You can forget your syntax. You can ask it, I want to solve a particular problem. It will tell you what the potential answer is. It will give you where it is, where it has picked it up from. It will write code for you. So you can just go in and it's available on the web. You can go Copilot Azure Quantum and you can start to create code for it, etc. So I'll wrap it up with summarizing that I think the world of R&D science is at a whole different paradigm shift. And this is just the beginning. In fact, our CEO is ambitious enough to say that...
Imagine if every scientist had access to their very own personalized supercomputer. How much faster could they go? How much further would they get? At Microsoft, we're actually doing it. We're co-innovating with the world's leading scientific institutions like Pacific Northwest National Laboratory to reduce the impact of climate change, get to net zero emissions, and find new ways to create, to store, and use energy more efficiently.
We're joining forces with Microsoft to explore this convergence of artificial intelligence, high-performance computing in the cloud. And this is a shift that the world of science hasn't seen since really the dawn of supercomputing. And for us, it's helping us tackle these challenges in chemistry and material science that are embedded in the search for new energy storage solutions that the world needs.
My name is 𝗣𝗲𝗧𝗏. I'm a material scientist here in Pacific Northwest National Lab. My research is mostly focused on designing next-generation battery materials. Electricity generation needs to be renewable energy, but the renewable energy is not constant. It's sporadic, right? There's a lot of rain, or there's no sun, a lot of winds. Battery gives you an opportunity to store energy in a compact way and deliver it whenever, however you want.
Microsoft was really excited to work deeply with an organization that has strong roots in chemistry, material science, and how those disciplines relate to sustainability. Our goal was to work with PNNL to take the burden of exploring vast chemical or material spaces. Computational tools allow us to put the emphasis in the most promising parts of that discovery process. That's going to require a new way of doing chemistry that's computation first. Our team discovered a new electrolyte that uses 70% less lithium than shown in other industry announcements, because it replaces part of it with the earth-abundant compound, sodium. Azure Quantum Elements accelerated the initial phase of the discovery process. It took what would have been 20 years of computation and compressed it down into 1 week to identify the most promising candidates for later exploration.
Battery has multiple components. You are trying to put completely different type of materials together, and then you are asking them to work together as a synergetically. One part of the battery is called the lithium ion. Lithium is fast, and its ability to move even within solids is what makes lithium more attractive. But lithium is not something that you can easily go and dig it up. It's only available in certain geopolitical places. What the scientists have been thinking about is that how can we make it to the next stage, right? Can we use something else that can work as good as lithium, but without the baggage of their environmental and safety issues?
Tackling this approach through the traditional trial and error method is simply too time-consuming. The ability to narrow down the playing field from millions of potential combinations of elements and structures to dozens in just months, something that would have taken decades. The acceleration aspect of this can't be understated.
This co-innovation model has the potential to transform every discovery-based field. Chemistry and material science impact nearly all manufactured goods. So think of areas like pharma, life sciences, transportation, manufacturing. All of it is in play.
What we're most excited about at Pacific Northwest National Laboratory in this partnership with Microsoft is the opportunity to accelerate scientific discovery, not just in chemistry and material science. This is just where we're starting. When you think about the convergence of artificial intelligence models coupled with high-performance computing in the cloud, running alongside of co-pilots that are trained in specific scientific disciplines, and having all of that come to bear at the disposal of the individual researcher or the scientist, that's a paradigm shift.
Thank you very much.
It's in the nature of ENRC to open up minds on things which will come in a couple of years ahead. And at the speed at which this is all coming. Maybe a couple of years is far too long a time, but at least this is
Yeah.
as much as we can absorb. It's all relevant because these are the problems we're dealing with, advanced solar cells, advanced batteries, which will otherwise, you just don't have the physical ability to build the kind of grids which would be required otherwise. It's just impossible. So
Yeah.
we need these innovations to come. I had a question for you, Rohini. When do we have a Dr. Murugesan in Indian lab?
Sorry, say again?
You had Dr.
Yeah,
Murugesan
yeah,
in
yeah.
a Pacific Northwest lab. When
Yeah.
do we have a Dr. Murugesan in
So,
an
you know,
Indian lab?
This is why I feel that, so for example, we've had sessions with 𝗖𝗹𝗲𝗃, and there is a need in India to realize that R&D is changing. It's super important, which is why, thanks for inviting me, because I think people have to realize that this is non-linear. This is not something you're going to just, brute force it, right? So and the fact is that, I engage a lot with the DST and their R&D community. People have the capabilities. It's a question of realizing that there is a paradigm shift and really opening your minds to thinking about R&D differently. So I'm very optimistic and bullish about having the
This will come. I might as well mention over here that we work with the Education Ministry and directly with the Education Minister to make some of these changes happen. He encourages enriches a platform. We saw him speaking about it earlier this morning, about how he encourages us to take those challenges. So maybe that's one challenge we accept and take it forward along with him. Maybe, who knows, something comes out of that. This a land of enormous possibilities.
Yeah, I'm happy to help collaborate, contribute in whichever way possible.
Right, thank you. I know that the audience will have questions, but since we want a tea break before that, I will encourage them to catch you over tea rather than in this forum. But thank you so much.
Thank
you.
you.
Have a small memento, which is just a traditional box of tea.
Thank you.
Not generated by AI, HPC, and computing. Just a regular box of tea that you're sure you enjoy. Get back here sharp at 4:30 for the concluding session. It's been super exciting. I know it's very heavy, but you saw what are the possibilities. So 4:30, we are back here. my right. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's been 2 long days, and we are coming to a conclusion of that, but I can also say 2 intense but happy days. The reason I say that is that, every time when we are doing 𝗍𝗏, I don't know where life is going to take us. Every time it's been taking us to a different place. This is a very different place from where we were last year, for sure. One is that we have explored frontiers which we have never done. Last 𝗍𝗏 hadn't spoken at all of AI, 0. There was no discussion on AI. Today, the theme of 𝗍𝗏 is AI for energy. And we discovered a lot of nuances on AI for energy. But what we saw in the last session is that now we are not talking of AI for energy alone. That combination of things which are right imminent over here, high performance computing, AI, quantum, coming together can absolutely blow us out of the place. And both of you, Dr. Mathur and Dr. Govil, you haven't had the opportunity to look at those discussions or presentations, but we can send you a snippet. It's just brilliant. And what has happened as a platform like this is that people are just willing to talk with each other and work with each other. So in your case, as I was commenting, that even in upstream oil and gas, making it much more efficient, much more environmentally sustainable, there's a whole lot of possibilities I can see with what we talked about today, but it's a different approach to things altogether. Similarly for power, solar storage, if you have to do, Sumant Sinha came this morning and he talked about that if we go by normal projections, we actually need 3,000 gigawatts to 4,000 gigawatts of solar and wind compared to 150 odd, which we have today. And that's going to cover up the whole country. We can't do that. It's not practically possible. So we have to find new ways of producing those electrons and molecules and transferring those electrons and molecules. This doesn't work. And we would have thought that that's not possible in anything other than what we have been doing with incremental efficiency gains. We just saw the possibilities of some phenomenal quantum gains, so to speak, to sound cliched a little bit, which are possible. So it's been a very long 1.5 days, but a little quite mind-opening, at least for me, and I'm sure for others as well. I'm going to take you through a little bit of a glimpse before I call you on. We are supposed to be joined by Mr. 𝗍𝗏𝗧𝗏, but he's not picking up his phone, which tells me that he currently doesn't have access to his phone, because that's normally otherwise he does at least message back. So we had different kinds of messages coming through this, and I'm going to summarize in a very different way because you can't go session by session. It's almost impossible to make sense. But what is the message coming from the political executive? It is a story of growth and sustainability commitment. There is no doubt about anybody's mind, and not just the political executive, but anybody in this room about the growth story. I haven't seen a single question of doubt over there. But also the sustainability commitment was universal. So I think it's not just the political, but actually all of us truly believe that this growth has to be sustainable. AI and innovation as a centerpiece to drive the whole Viksit Bharat, and I've given you already a little bit of a glimpse of why we are saying that, because if you don't drive AI and innovation, you really cannot get to the numbers which we are talking about. It's not physical, it's going to become physical impossibilities unless we change the physics and chemistry of it, so to speak. They talked about industry-academia collaboration, and this is something which is coming in and again as a theme that we talk about in the lip service. It's not lip service, there's intent, but there's no way of translating, and they have challenged us as a platform, as a community, and as a platform on whether we can make this happen. And I can also share that through their messages, Mr. Puri was there in person, Mr. Pradhan is in Australia, but he sent his a pretty cogent message across. And they said that everything is open for making that happen. You have to make that, facilitate that. And I think 𝗍𝗏 as a platform has become a facilitating platform for such things. And skill development was something both of them were talking about. And I understand that employment is a big issue over there. What we are also realizing is that employment cannot be in the lower order skills any longer. Many of them have to move on to higher order skills. And that's a process that won't happen by itself. So that process, democratizing education, including what government is doing through some things called 𝗖𝗹𝗶𝗰𝗁+, it's hardly known in the industry. And this was a good platform for those who attended to actually know about it. It was live streamed. So there is a different population which comes together to start understanding the fact that the government is keen on it, but there is something which we have to travel together. So those were some of their messages. We went to and you see the thing, 𝗩𝗹𝗲𝗱𝗏 𝗧 निभाना पड़ेगा, because that's a promise India in some sense has made to the world, that when the world from a manufacturing supply chain standpoint is like looking to kind of de-risk, India is the logical place. So we have stood up and said that yes, we want to be. Are we quite there? We are not quite there. And the gap, we don't need to mimic China, but we need to understand that even if we take a different pathway, we have to get to more or less the same efficiency frontiers where China operates. And there's a lot of good things which happen in China which we need to understand, along with some things which we may not agree with. One of the things which came out is that we don't have industry-to-industry collaboration. So we're just catchily coining it as eye to eye. But we really don't have a basis of industry-to-industry collaboration. We compete. We follow the Western model of competing. And it is okay to compete, but there is also a need to collaborate at certain places. And the question was that, how do we make collaboration happen? And one of the things which I'm going to put across to you both is on whether there is a space for collaboration in the industry that you see when you come up over here. And what are the routes? One route potentially we talked about is the standards. China has gone ahead so much because they've worked hard and created standards which then the industry follows. And then after that, they can compete as much in this. We have been laggards in this. If China has in a SIGRE conference, China has 700, 800 people attending, we have 5. Okay, so that's the scale. So what can we do for industry to also step up, research to step up? The second thing is that AI has great amount of possibilities, but AI is also a challenge, and we talked about how, in metaphorical terms, in 2022, AI had the same consumption as Estonia. In 2027, it will go to Sweden, and 2030, it will go to Australia. That much of energy consumption. So you can, and we will need AI. It's a reality. There's no point resisting or declining. In fact, 𝗍𝗏𝗱𝗏, the management guru, keeps saying this, that it is, you cannot deny AI without being left behind. So you have to do it. But then how do we use it for the purpose of good? I think that's a key question there. And the third thing which ONGC chairman made this morning, he said, this is something which you should not do piecemeal. You should take a full integrated view of AI, and that's very consistent with our view, where AI has to be what we call scalable, replicable, extendable. Using consulting jargon, he gave us a much better way of saying it. Take it on an look at an integrated basis rather than piecemeal. It won't deliver if it do that. Now, what is AI? We talked about AI through and through this conference, and I think it's just same that last point comes out as that it's a good servant and a bad master, like fire. Fire is a good servant, it's a bad master. And we need to find ways to make it a good servant for us. We need to still have the control over there. It's a lot about making that balance happen to keep sustainability in question. A few things which came out is that while we are talking about AI for energy, the same reverse question is being asked across the world. How much energy for AI? And I think that is one balance which, in some sense, you could, maybe Dr. Mathur, you have a direct view on some of these things, because the data centers are all asking for renewable energy. Can we produce that kind of renewable energy? How do we manage that? That's a bit of a question. And again, Ramcharan's question, thing paraphrased over here in some sense. What AI can do, he tells the CEOs, is more important than how AI does it. So just embrace that. Data, I think this is a fundamental of everything. So how do we get our data organized is important. It's not just about the quantum of data, but the organization of the data. But yesterday when I was presenting on the AI platforms and how to get the large language models to talk to each other, it does come out that you have to make the right choices of data and right choices of models. And then today, in the previous panel, my colleague Colm made a very interesting observation. He says that in the companies, we are seeing that the companies are accelerating and braking at the same time, and the engine is burning off in the process. So somewhere you have to put the guardrails and then get the accelerator and get the foot off the brakes. Just put the guardrails, governors, you need the governors, but then you have to get the foot off the brakes. We talked a lot about this morning about getting to 3x RE and 2x EE, and my colleague Mike Hayes has healthy skepticism of whether we are going to get there or not. We also talked about going beyond 2030 because these are the 2030 goals. And this is extremely difficult to build infrastructure, not just the renewables, but the transmission infrastructure which comes along with it, the storage. So this is something which we have to plan beyond the 2030. But even 2030 is a question which we discussed extensively. And a few things which came out as key highlights was the debate between green, blue, and gray. Okay, and there is a view, and ma'am, maybe, I know that people will have views, but there's a clear view that gas is not as clean because when you take the methane emissions, so what do you do with the methane emissions is a question. I think you and I have discussed it in your office sometimes. So we'll be keen to hear from you about the role of methane, and Dr. Mathur as well, from your climate standpoint, you have a very clear view on what, sorry. I mean, I know I need to shut up, but just give me a little time. The role of grids, the nuclear question, that's very interesting, and the methane question I've talked about. Making AI a power of good for our workforce. There's a big concern about what are the impacts of the workforce. I've already touched upon it. We want to come back to you on that point as well, on what's your take on some of these. But just a couple of things which came out. Government is trying a lot. So 𝗬𝗲 plus the mechanism which is there, which is industry and government getting together for credits, for proctored courses, and so on, so that education can become much more accessible. So IIT education doesn't remain for those, what used to be 3,000, now is 20,000. If you have to get to 200,000, then you need a different method. And IIT Madras is doing some interesting experimentation around it. So we can talk about that a little bit, but it's important that we make high quality education much more accessible to people rather than just keeping it very elitist, if I had to speak. Building trust in the workforce, and the workforce having trust in technology also is important. And finally, change management. How do you make change happen? Because a lot of this is about change management. And finally, coming to the customer, we talked about the customer. Basically, a similar theme, and this is, of course, again, paraphrasing part of Gandhiji's quote, he's not an interruption, and if he had to be gender neutral, we would have said it differently today, but not an interruption for our work, it's the purpose of it. A few questions which we discussed were leveraging customer assets, including, say, the smart meters. We are, and renewable energy, for example, if it goes down to the rooftops and the industries, we don't have the means for dealing with some of them when there's a backfeed into the grid. The grids become unstable. There's no predictability. So how do we leverage those assets was the question. Earning customer trust. You're putting meters. You're doing many kinds of things with them. Are you asking them? Are you taking them into confidence? How do you earn the trust? And then changing those who serve the customers, because especially in the electricity system, but sometimes even in the petroleum sector, we are really not focused on the customer. Okay, we actually sometimes think that the customer is a problem. So how do you change those who serve the customers was important. And finally, I mean, we don't have the slide because this was just before this deck was prepared. We talked about this thing about completely changing the paradigm and looking at AI, high performance computing, and quantum coming together to look at a very different way of science, and that's not how our educational research institutions approach that. But today, science is being approached fundamentally in a different way. How you discover new molecules, how do you discover new ways of doing things is completely changing with the new technological approaches. So I'm not sure we're going to get to all of that, and I don't want to necessarily strain you and the audience who've been very nice. I know we have lost some of it inevitably after 1.5 days. You cannot. These are the diehards who are still around over there, but you can see that there are still a number of diehards in the room. May I now invite you to come over, and I'm going to use these slides to actually ask you some questions. So Dr. Govil and Dr. Mathur, please join me. Please. I'm going to, you have the mic there as well? Yes, okay. So first reactions, when you have seen this, is it another, I mean, how are you reading these messages? Maybe, ma'am, we start with you and then go to Dr. Mathur.
So they're all relevant and great messages, all reiterating what's going on in our mind, just put together very nice, cogently. So yes, thank you. And as an aside, I'm tempted to tell you this story that, you know, the one point of, you know, brakes and accelerator put together is something which I've, you know, it's a learned experience. First time I moved from a stick shift to so I was driving the automatic vehicle. I had no idea, you know, so I banged them both together. So I said, what do you do with your left foot? So like, just keep it on the side. So yeah, I get that metaphor a lot, and especially as it applies to our sector. So thank you for having me here, and it's, I think you've put together the thoughts very, very nicely. Thank you.
Right. Dr. Mathur, any first observation? Anything struck you?
Well, it really struck me how AI has gotten into our lives. All the way from the customer to training of capacity building of both consumers and the supply side, to managing the technology itself, both making and managing the technology. In all of this, AI plays a big role. It plays it today, and the role will only increase. So I was very, very intrigued, for example, to learn of an AI algorithm that is being used to help develop training courses for energy professionals. And this goes into looking at the websites, looking at case studies, and therefore developing pedagogy which is based on learning, which is based on the best practice as it exists today. So, you can set in years for which you want reports to be read, and put it 2 years. I was looking at it in the green hydrogen area. But the more important issue, and it also it resonates with the issue of the IITs that you said, how can we enhance the reach? This is the issue of examinations. You can provide courses. Right now, for example, all universities in the world provide these MOOCs, whatever they stand for. You can do the courses, but you don't get a certificate. I think it is important for us, especially if we are looking at large upscaling education, whether it is training or whether it is large-scale education, to establish the kind of certification systems. And my belief is that we need to focus on AI to help us, because at the end of the day, it's each one of us is very different. We need a certain degree of standardization, but we also need the degree of flexibility to look at that. It also is important at the level of shorter programs when you are looking at, for example, developing chemistries for batteries. To me, this is one of the key issues that faces us. What are, all of us talk about the lithium-ion batteries and the shortage of lithium and so on, right? What did we come up with? We came up with something very similar, sodium-ion batteries. Well, sodium-ion batteries have come to the point where today there are cars in which sodium-ion battery is the default rather than the lithium-ion batteries. But are there other chemistries? I think AI becomes a very useful tool to look at the kinds of molecules which are possible. Similarly, I could go on, Anish.
Right.
I could talk about how AI could help us in forecasting, for example. Both the weather patterns, but more importantly, the maintenance patterns. About how it could help us in figuring out where load flows occur. Far better, much more precise than humans can do. The possibilities are immense.
Right.
I think what behooves us is how do we make it happen.
Right. So good thing, because it comes from you, I think it's a good thing that we have discussed those things today. In some sense, including the new chemistries which you talked about. That was just before this session. We talked about the chemistries, and we had the Chief Technology Officer of Microsoft India and South Asia coming and talking to us, Dr. Rohini Srivathsa. And she actually showed that whole thing, both in her presentation and through a video at which Microsoft and Pacific Northwest lab is working on. And it's creating a completely new method of getting to new chemistries and molecules which don't exist today for applications like batteries. So that's what is happening. I had a different question for her, which is that when she finished, is that and there was an Indian scientist over there. I said, when does that Dr. Nambiar come and work? And when do we have a Dr. Nambiar in the Indian labs rather than the Pacific Northwest labs? And I'm really hoping that that day is not very far, because we do have we have the same set of people who are going and doing things over there. The intellectual horsepower is there. But somewhere our own approach to this, our own approach to research has to change. And rather than the old ways of approaching research, the way of approaching research and combining computing and AI with traditional research for creating new chemistries, new molecules, is completely a different ballgame altogether. So I think there is a step there to embrace.
Anish, there's also a huge bit in how we train ourselves, because to be able to manage AI is an art by itself. How do you get it to provide the results that you want depends on how you interact. How do you see the results that it provides? It depends on you. So I think we also need to train ourselves right from the beginning, right from the level of bachelor's or master's education, possibly even earlier, to be able to do this kind of interaction with AI as is possible.
So one statistic again from one previous conversation, 𝗩𝗲𝗃 yesterday, not last week actually, in the Golden Jubilee celebrations of CES and Electricity Authority, one of the participants came and met, and she's doing her doctorate. And she says now 50% of the doctorates are AI-led doctorates. So it's and this is the level of where penetration is happening. That's why I think there's a great possibility, but we need to make that convert into not from degrees to actually products on the ground. So one of the things which we have been discussing is our country going from a projects economy to a products economy. And if we are very, very project oriented, build a hydrogen project, build a transmission project, build stuff, but the supply chain comes from somewhere else, the materials come from somewhere else. Till the time we can make the transition to a products country, I think there will be a gap in that जो वादा किया वो निभाना पड़ेगा. Your observation.
Anish, when you talk about AI, one abiding thought is that AI is also very inclusive. So if the Solar Alliance can use AI, or sustainable energies, renewable energies can use AI, so can fossil fuels.
Yep.
Right? And for us, as the Directorate General of Hydrocarbons, tasked with finding more and more fossil fuel and extracting it most efficiently and most speedily, we see the immense possibilities, not just in finding gas and oil, but in how to best take it out, how to optimize our operations. We see AI in the future, or very, very near future, helping us in efficient operations. So how do we optimize the production? How do we minimize venting? How do we minimize flaring? Where do you see emission loss happening? So those kind of possibilities are immense for the organization to talk to industry and move them to a product, as you said, but then that product being a very efficient kind of operations for that matter. So the power of AI, and then when you spoke about how AI is now in the education sector, and the bad thing, again the thought is that it's not a bad word anymore. So when I was doing a doctorate, when I was doing a master's, I remember at Princeton, the first thing they said was that everything you turn in will come through Turnitin. So what was Turnitin? Turnitin was just a web tool which checked that whatever you've turned in is not plagiarized, right? But now you can't do that anymore. It's how fast technology has changed, because everything through Turnitin will be rejected because there'll be so many algorithms. So what they have done is that they have ways of checking what parts, but original ideas have to be yours. If words are matching from something else, that's fine, as long as the ideas. So what I'm saying is that you've got to be nimble all the time. Organizations have to be nimble all the time. My organization, which is tasked again with setting the rules in hydrocarbon exploration and production, has to be ahead of industry to be able to support industry.
Right.
So that's the challenge which AI is putting before us.
Right. So I want to come to your industry, ma'am, and talk about industry-to-industry collaboration. If you really have to make that advancement, and I made that in my opening comments, we really need to get the scale. And if everybody does the thing at the same level, or separately, you really don't get there. Now, I know that we should compete, because otherwise you don't bring the efficiency that you need. But at the fundamental level, there is a certain amount of collaboration which is required. For example, on safety, okay, there is no cost associated with that collaboration. It's good for everybody. For data sharing, banks do that for credit, okay, because otherwise it's a costly thing for everyone. So that's one aspect. Are you seeing enough of that? And I have a second thing, that between the public sector and the private sector, there's hardly any collaboration. So it's costing us, because often the startups, and we have talked about startups quite a bit yesterday, they get the public sector seed funding for pilots and stuff, but the moment it happens, it lives and dies with the public sector. It doesn't go to the private sector. So two things: is the public sector itself collaborating enough? In your case, an ONGC, OIL, are they collaborating, are they sharing? And is the public sector and the private sector collaborating enough? Because if we don't do that, then we really don't get to the economic objectives that we have.
What I just remarked casually in passing, that AI is also very inclusive. So I would just extend that a little bit more by saying that technology and AI in particular being inclusive in the sense that new players may be more equipped than older behemoths.
Yeah.
And industry would do well to recognize that and to embrace that. And that gives the opportunity, say, to an AI startup, or to a young researcher, or to a young thinker, or to a young, well, not necessarily young. I mean, I'm still young. So, so to a coughing young. So it gives the opportunity to every individual to leverage their own expertise, innovativeness, and be a part of industry. And it would do well for the public sector to recognize that and embrace it, rather than ignore it at their own peril. Yeah. So 𝗍𝗶𝗆 that.
Yeah, 𝗍𝗶𝗆 that. Good. I'm going to move forward into that question of...
Can I add to what Dr. Gobel said? One of the things that has bothered me is that the public sector has been very supply-driven. It's not as consumer-centric as it needs to be. Over the past few months, when India was launching its solar rooftop program, we forced it to be customer-centric, and that's why you have a national portal on which anybody who's interested can put in, you can find vendors and so on. I'd like AI, for example, to rate the vendors.
Yep.
Depending on how people react, etc.
It has to be more than just the arithmetic average of the ranking that you get, for example, as you see on Google. But we have the opportunity to be a lot more customer-centric with the kinds of technological opportunities that are coming up.
In fact, that's what you said, ma'am, that it's very, very universal, very democratic. So we just...
And as you very rightly mentioned, the new players have a huge advantage.
Actually so. And the older players, including not just the public sector, but I think international oil companies have the same problem. Their guards are so much up that they actually don't let fresh air in.
So, at the risk of extending this discussion and not allowing you to move on to the next, one of the challenges that we have is that the existing business model is that new technologies are essentially developed by small startups. But then they are bought by larger companies which have got much better networks of marketing. Is this a model that is going to change with AI? I don't know.
I think it's a good question to explore.
But it's something that can lead to the kind of change that you were talking about.
I think that's a good question to take back from here and explore that further. Let me come to the 3x to x question, the renewable energy, energy efficiency, and I'll keep that to renewable energy for you. I know that you can cover the whole remit, but I want to come to the methane questions for the hydrocarbon sector also for that. What can we do really on that? Because these are pressing issues, both the scale and the nature of the ask. Now, on the 3x renewable energy, how confident are you that as a world we are headed to the right place, Dr. Mathur?
Anish, it ultimately depends on only one thing, which is, can you provide round-the-clock renewable energy at prices that are lower than that from fossil fuels? In the last 4 auctions that have been carried out in India in the first few months of this year, we got prices of round-the-clock renewable electricity at less than 5 rupees a kilowatt hour. New coal power plants clocked in at more than 5 rupees per kilowatt hour. So in my view, the economics has happened. Now we need adequate land, we need adequate transmission lines, we need adequate investment money. Even the cost of electricity is low, investment is higher. Those are all solvable and doable problems. So yes, we will not only meet the 3x, we will probably exceed it.
On the rooftop side of things, just extending that, there's a big scheme there and it's a very heavily subsidy-driven scheme. But there have been questions which have been raised that if it happens on that scale, we are not ready. Okay. Are we going to have a problem in that?
When was this launched? It was launched approximately
last budget.
About a year ago.
Yeah.
Less than a year ago. In 1 year, we have done 6 gigawatts, 6,000 megawatts of rooftop.
Okay.
This is very good. For years we did nothing. Now, this is not to say that everything is hunky-dory, but I think as a country we have a habit of looking back at policies and tweaking them to make them more efficient. Mr. Razdan is here. He was Secretary Power when I was in the Bureau of Energy Efficiency. And one of the things we used to constantly do was to look at how policies can be tweaked to make them more effective. I'm reasonably sure the same thing will happen. For example, the gradation of the vendors is something that is waiting to happen.
Okay. Okay. And do we have the right standards? Because one of the things which we have been talking about is that India really has to get the game up on standards, because without that we're just following and then we are importing. Yeah, are we there?
This is a tough question, and it is tough because different countries will have different standards. Maybe different groups of countries will have different standards, but we will need to find our own standards. We are not there. Agreed. We will become better. But it doesn't mean that we can copy the standards from elsewhere.
Okay. Now let me come to the hydrocarbon sector and the efficiencies in the hydrocarbon sector. Are you seeing the efficiency frontiers, being close to the efficiency frontiers, or there's a lot to do? That's one part. And the second is the methane question, which we talked about extensively. While on paper it seems that there is no leakage, but really if you have the satellite pictures and the thermal imagery, you know that there is some disconnect there. So what's two parts to that question?
Yes, so I think in terms of energy efficiency, we are just starting, just about, and why we are starting, while companies have done their own efforts, but from the side of the government, there was very little, or just the beginning of an effort to benchmark it, to do a stock taking of where we are vis-a-vis rest of the world, to do a stock taking of where each company is in its own operations, and then to have a conversation about it and lead them to put in place efficient solutions for their own production work. So in that, we've started a new center for energy efficiency, for hydrocarbon efficiency. So that is going to be tasked, and so we're just sort of starting to learn, because if any part of government, not the power sector, but for the hydrocarbon sector, is going to learn about hydrocarbon efficiency, that's where we're doing. And, learning from the rest of the world, but not copying it and making our own standards is also something which we've started. So we have a tie-up with the federal organization of the US. We are learning how they are doing their methane abatement in their hard-to-abate sectors. What are they doing? So we're just understanding it so that we can pick up what is good and relevant to us and customize it as per our own needs. Our own hydrocarbon sector so far contributes 3 to 4% of the methane emissions, but even then, I mean, 3 to 4% also makes a difference. So if we can work with our companies in understanding, in measuring methane emissions, in seeing how to, what measures are best suited for them to put in, to do the abatement, to the rectification, that's what we're tasking ourselves with. So I think it's a positive move forward. Whether it is a sufficient move forward, I don't know. So we are still working on it to make it relevant and sufficient enough to make a difference.
Right. So one of the things, the hyper efficiency which we are aiming for, hopefully, I mean efficiency and then eventually hyper efficiency which we are aiming for, the reduction of methane, any of these things, they are all dependent on data. So I brought back the slide data. We also know that data is sometimes massaged. Okay, so it is very difficult to have faith in the data, and sometimes it leads you to the wrong practices. And I know that it happens because sometimes you don't want to disclose what it is. So physically we have been manipulating information in various ways. But has the data environment become more credible, more automatic? Has it improved for you in DGH and in the solar sector or the energy sector broadly? Are you seeing, Dr. Mathur? First, Dr. Govil.
There are two aspects. One is that even in my own exposure to this sector, I see a huge amount of strides which have been made, big strides have been made in using data. And I see a huge possibility again for AI to come in and help us out. So if we were to see, just for example, emissions, AI can tell us that here is a higher probability of emission not being captured, and this is where you need to look. So data is going to be it already is our bread and butter. So if you're, even your routine operations, when you're looking at a field development plan, say for example for any company, you look at, first thing you look at is their data, and then you look at the weaknesses in the data to understand what is it that they are planning to do, how robust is their planning, whether we can improve their planning, can we make their operations more efficient, can we make their operations more precise, can we make their drilling more precise. All this is data dependent. And so we see a huge scope for improving our own work. But for that, our organization, each and every employee, each and every person who's working in whether it is the administrators like me who are, 10 thumbs, or it is people who are working on their terminals, everyone needs to be upgraded on their own knowledge and how to handle this data, how to do the interpretation themselves, how to leverage new technology coming in to interpret better what they have in front of them. So that's the possibility, and there's the challenge.
Right. Okay. Dr. Mathur, in the power sector, it's a data-driven sector anyway, except that we have not been using it enough. Okay. And now we are talking really we need the optimization to happen, the grid balancing, security, reliability, all of that to happen. Are you comfortable with what you see in terms of the data availability? I know that it's possibly a no answer, but in a manner of speaking, are we making progress in making data more accessible as well as utilized more?
So, Anish, I don't think anybody is completely satisfied, but I think we are moving in the right direction. For example, about 6-7 years ago, or 5 years ago, we used to look at the data and it was available, but it was available in PDF files, which were very difficult to manage. Thankfully, the real-time data is now available in more accessible formats.
Right.
But we've also backslided. I am pointing towards Mr. Razdan. He had approved that we make energy efficiency data regarding appliances available in the public sector. But I see, sir, that it's been withdrawn now. So I'm actually wondering which direction are we going in. It's the proverbial story of moving ahead 4 inches and walking back 2 inches.
Okay. I'm going to, it's been a long day for everyone. I'm sure at workplaces you have had enough on your plate. So I'm going to end with 2 questions. One is the nuclear question. Okay, and either of you or both of you can aim to answer. I think all of us understand that nuclear has to be a part of the mix, but there's still not enough confidence that it is going to happen in the time spans which we need. Are you seeing anything which makes you more optimistic?
So yesterday, the Financial Times carried a story that the tech firms, Google, Microsoft, etc., were getting into bed with manufacturers of small modular reactors.
Yeah.
To me, this is the first step in getting the technology from the drawing board into use. A few days ago, we were looking at scenarios for the future. We could plan on the costs of renewable energy, full, around-the-clock renewable energy, because we have background information for several years for batteries and for PV. We don't have for SMRs.
Yeah.
If SMRs become available, then we would start having that. But at this moment, based on the kinds of assumptions that people are making, I expect that SMRs would form the background, they would form the basis for the base load, with renewables forming the bulk of the energy needs. So it'll be both nuclear and renewables.
Right.
So, Anish, if you're standing, say, in France or in Russia or in Japan, and you were to ask the same question, they would say, no doubt.
Yeah.
Nuclear is going to be big. But to me, I think for India, we need to then invest much more into research. We need to encourage much more into research than we are doing currently. And there is a lot of that the government is doing in terms of research outlays, in terms of getting the network of research universities working on these problems. But I just think we need to
much more on research. So I might mention to you, I have mentioned the audience just before because Mr. Pradhan couldn't be here, but I met him before he left for Australia. And one of the things he really wants to do is see how we can get that standard of research up, including through AI, just using AI to as a means for getting the standard of research up in our organizations. And they're already working on certain things, setting up centers of excellence in some of the key universities. But I think that, to me, is a critical cog in the thing. But that won't happen in itself unless you get the industry to collaborate with the researchers. Otherwise, research in isolation doesn't really go anywhere. I mean, a lot of it is applied research, right? So if you don't have the application space, then you actually really cannot get there.
So, Anish, if I look at the past history, then academia has been able to perform when it is given very clear goals by industry. And industry is able to perform when it has got very clear demand which requires innovation. So public policy looking at forward-looking progression of standards means that the industry will then involve academia in developing the technology. And if this becomes a regular basis, then that collaboration becomes a lot more robust. Else, there is always the temptation to buy technology and use it if it's a one-off.
Yeah, no, that's exactly the problem we have today. And I think in some ways, this platform, 𝗓𝗏 and Dr. Mathur, you've been here multiple times before. We have just grown to become, at least facilitate a dialogue. We can't do that much beyond facilitating a dialogue. And sometimes we are trying to go beyond. But that dialogue has reached to a point where I think there's a lot of trust and we can see the more of need of that. But we are doing what we can. The second part which has happened is that we realized that co-innovation along with the industry is a big thing. And one of the things which in fact, you are the culprit. In COP28, you caught hold of me and said that 𝗓𝗏 should meet more frequently. You, Rajiv Mishra, Siddharth Malik, we were, and then I must tell this story to the audience over here as a closing story. We were all at Dubai at COP28, and I was hosting a dinner, and Dr. Mathur, Rajiv Mishra, who couldn't be here, 𝗓𝗏𝗧 CEO, and Siddharth Malik, who is a young, professional, not young, he's the MD of a company now in Oman today. They all caught hold of me and they said that you must make 𝗓𝗏 a more regular engagement platform. And that, in long story short, that spawned the 𝗓𝗏 Labs, which we have spoken about yesterday as well. And in that, what we do is that we get the industry together, 40, 45 people from the industry, senior people who are, have a view on things. And then we ask for their problem statements. We started with asking for their problem statements around innovation, because that was the theme which we had talked about. And then quickly it went to AI-led innovation, because in today innovation without AI doesn't work. What we have been doing is that we have been creating basis the problem statements rather than technology for technology's sake, taking the technology to the problem. And some of those things, including the learning things which you talked about, actually people have developed MVPs, shown them in the next lab, and that created that confidence. And it's become a it's become a very virtuous cycle. And I narrated this story to the audience also, that when I asked the 𝗓𝗏 Council, which because of conflict of interest you couldn't join, but which is understandable, but the council exists. And when I asked the council from the industry that, do you want us to continue or should we shut up and shut off, because it's a lot of effort which goes on. And they just said, how could you even ask this question? So that's where we are. We are really grateful to you, to the industry, to everyone in this room and outside this room for the collaboration, the friendship which we have seen through the years. This is our 15th year, but especially in the last year, it's been very different for us. And I think that's a great position of honor and responsibility that we have. And that's why, people come together at 𝗓𝗏. There's nothing else which we do except for some discussions and some decent food. But I think we take back a lot from this, and I'm taking back a lot from this discussion as well. We'll close with a short video to show you what happened at 𝗓𝗏. Can we have the video on?
Anish, can we have a question?
I think we can. So if you can get the mics across. I'm just conscious of time, but we won't stop the questions for sure.
See, we've been talking about virtually the advances in AI and the collective information. After all, at the end of the day, it is collecting all information and make it available to those who matter most in the process, to make the whole process more efficient. But having been a public servant, I think the one thing that is lacking in our society is, you see, transparency. Now, I have a question to both of the participants here. And one is, you see, we're doing great in adding ethanol for diesel, for doping. And we are increasing that. Now, are the engines which are on the road today, diesel engines, prior to 2022, are they tuned to run on that fuel? Does the consumer know it? That whether this fuel is going to give me a lesser average or a higher average for my fuel? I think the answer is no. You'll have to disprove it, because I've known it personally. Secondly, very good, you see, AI is giving us all the information, and every producer must be conscious of what is his percentage of performance, what is his efficiency of operations. I think each one of these people should, at the end of the day, be made to declare concurrently that what was his efficiency during the day. He's given the public domain something that 30% efficiency of my cells, or 40% or 18%. But we have a right to know. It's public money. It's the public which has to approve or disprove that technology, accept it or throw it out of the window. Now that transparency, I think, is not there in our system. I'll just end by saying that this transparency is helping us combat pollution. Because at least major cities have, you see, the air quality index. So you and I know that where we are going wrong, what is the danger today. Now that public awareness and that sharing of information, which is not going to affect the security of the state in any way, the citizen has a right to know. I don't want to use a controversial term, right to information, because it's not a very popular term. But I think to get public confidence, to get public involvement on a mass scale in these improvements, this is a must.
I think that's as much an observation as a question. I think there is a right point, absolutely valid point, not just on transparency, but co-opting people who are affected or are, effectively using some of those things. And I think that's a very important point. We have not done really well, or we haven't advanced as a country. And maybe that's something which, again, there would be short-term pushes and pulls, but I think there is a need for looking at that question much more deeply. Thank you for that question, Mr. Azdan. I mean, we'll have tea and coffee outside. We can continue the conversation, but let's have the closing video. I'm just conscious that it's been very, very intense days for us, and there's so much more to discuss. Okay. Yeah, maybe then, before then, Tapan, before it comes, let me felicitate our two guests who have been really generous with the time and their knowledge, their perspectives. So let me, we need to, the photographers get their privileges. Thank you. It's just a traditional box office. Not together, yes. Yes. Yeah, you have to be them. We can keep this here. And I request you to just sit a little bit for the video and then we close.
No, there, because you will be able to see it on the screen.
𝗍 this year is very, very special. It is the 15th year, but it's also because we are doing so many different things since last year.
Thank you for inviting me here for what I believe is my 3rd year running coming to this event.
It's wonderful to be here at the start of the conference.
𝗍 is a global platform. It's a great platform where all stakeholders come together, whether it's government policymakers, whether it's other players within the industry, as well as us, with a view to discuss issues as well as the future.
There's some incredible thoughts I heard over the last couple of days, and I'm sure that a lot of these are going to feed into our solutions, our interactions that we do with the government, multilaterals, private sector clients. Our aim would be to collectively move forward in addressing a lot of these challenges that came forth in the last couple of days.
Nice to be here at this KPMG session on innovation and AI, and I think we had a very good fireside chat.
AI and Gen AI have made this year's 𝗍 all the more interesting, and all of it culminates today. So I'm super proud and excited to be part of this conference.
What I find particularly fascinating is the applicability of AI even on the consumer side, to be able to nudge consumer behavior by offering very personalized suggestions as well.
𝗍 has become a platform for us to share, connect, learn and grow.
𝗍 has always been an energy experience for me, and I always look forward to being part of it.
It's an opportunity to meet people who believe in the energy transition, who are prepared to have a realistic discussion about what we need to do to accelerate it.
Collaboration, co-creation and energy. That is what 𝗍 is all about. See you in 𝗍 2025.
This year we're celebrating the 15th year of 𝗍. Extremely proud to be part of this journey for the last 10 years.
We at 𝗍 always endeavor to innovate and be ahead of the learning curve.
So it's special. Thank you to a wonderful team which has made this happen. It takes a lot to make this happen. Thank you, 𝗍. You led a fascinating effort, to you, Ruchika, to everybody else who did, to Geeta, everybody who just put this together. It's always magical. It's hard, but we are here at the end of 2 days, 2 wonderful days. And thank you everybody who's currently here in the room and those who have been there for these 2 days. We have a whole lot of people being here. We really appreciate your partnership and your friendship. So we'll see you again next year in most likely in 15th and 16th of September in 2025 for 𝗍 2025. Thank you again. And thank you today to my co-host Nidhi. Come up please.
Everyone, but he needs the biggest compliments. I've seen you, doing so much of hard work and energy.
No, this wasn't why you came to the stage.
I think you did a commendable job, and the team with whom you work with, Anish, it's great. And every year, how can you bring a new topic and kind of weave the story around that, around people, around operations. It's commendable. So kudos to you.
Thank you, but it's all because of us. Thank you. Please join us for tea and coffee outside, and then we meet again. Thank you.
Thank you very much.